inspired. Get motivated. Creative. And believe that you can achieve whatever your goals may be. Join me, Karen Kelly, each Tuesday for Authors and More, with amazing guests sharing their journey to help get you where you need to be. Hello and welcome to Authors and More, and joining me tonight is Judith Barton. So welcome, Judith.
Thank you, Karen. Great to be with you.
Oh, it's lovely to have you on the show today. So Judith, you're an internationally recognised speaker, coach, mentor, supervisor, leadership facilitator and founder of the British School of Coaching. And you've also written a book called Celebrating Women of the Emirates. That's a mouthful, isn't it? So congratulations on your book.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really recognizing all those amazing women that probably we don't quite get from maybe our Western perspective. So that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah. So obviously with your coaching, you have international clients, obviously global clients. So did you do a lot of business in the Emirates for you to obviously get involved in writing a book about women of the Emirates?
We did. We were there late 90s, and then it opened in sort of very early 2000s. And the country always has been sort of seen as quite open, but very small. And then it started to expand in terms of expat recruitment, and bring in. At that time, there was sort of conversations around the citizens of the country. So we were doing quite a lot of work, both with local organisations and government and international, and so became very aware and very comfortable in the environment we were working in.
Wow. And then, of course, with your work and your success, you were asked to be the chief assessor of the Emirates Award. And this is all contributing to how you ended up writing this book. So what is the Emirates Award?
I know, it's funny, isn't it, how roads take you down.
It's very prestigious, isn't it?
Yeah, we were actually called, and I can remember this call to say, you have been recommended. And there was silence, and I remember Mohammed speaking to me, and Mohammed was involved in the Emirates Women's Award in terms of the sponsor, and this was in sort of 2004, and this was all coming from at the time Shell. So Shell obviously
they were the sponsors, weren't they?
They were the sponsors at this time, and were very keen that. One, they wanted an award that was rigorous and evidence-based, and it really reflected what was happening in the society. And of course, it's a big recruiter worldwide, and it needed such a range of skill. So it had, I suppose, in their eyes, it had many indicators in terms of what made it successful. So we had that conversation, and what would you need to make an award have the reputation and the rigor and the recognition of what's now the Emirates Women's Award.
Yeah, because there is a bit of a stigma, really, isn't it? I mean, my ignorance, I actually thought that, women didn't work as much as men, but actually they are respected in their profession. And a lot of women do hold high, really respectable roles, don't they? Mm-hmm. It's completely different. There's nothing untoward about it at all, is there?
No, I mean, it was quite a moment, because there were a number of things happening at that time, and over the period, I would say then from sort of 2005 was our first award that we ran, and I was the chief assessor for probably the 10 years, which takes in the time in the book. Then the first, if you like, female graduates were achieving the most senior positions. So those ladies were in their late 40s, early 50s at that time, because that was the first ever tranche. And at that time, when I say tranche, there was probably max of 20 in the country, because at that time it wasn't encouraged for females to go outside the country for university. And that was
Right.
partly about income because the Emirates were not in the position they are now. And it was partly about custom and practice. So there were a number of, in essence, two universities in one emirate called Sharjah, which was considered the very cultural emirate, and originally where all of the activity came from, because there were seven emirates, Sharjah being one, Dubai, which most people know about, but actually, Sharjah was the number one place at that time. And the
Right.
university was there. And also, way up in Al Ain, which is another emirate, which was considered very sort of, I suppose, intellectual, cultural, educational. And ladies went to university and they were residential and they had their own ladies' block. And you could study engineering or accounting. Those were the two subject areas.
Just those two.
Yes,
Wow.
those were the two. There was no, obviously life has moved on. But if you think then, so in 2004, in that 10-year period, these ladies were coming to the fore. And they followed very much the Egyptian model that many women are engineers in Egypt. And lots of the engineers hired in the Middle East are Egyptian and female. So that's where it sort of started. That was one big driver. And we were very fortunate that His Highness Sheikh Ahmed, who is the president and CEO of Emirates Airlines, amongst other things, was very keen that he wanted an award that recognised Emirati ladies and expat ladies. There was no sort of separation. It wasn't about one being greater than another. It was about international benchmarking.
So that
And he
surprises me
really
really,
saw,
because obviously um, women expatriated women are well, they're raised differently, their thought patterns different, we're different culture altogether. So they wouldn't have
yes,
been through the same kind of journey, if you like, to get to their profession, would they? So that
no.
surprises me that they
And
included those women as well.
yes, sorry, Karen, it was that there were it was everybody said everyone comes to the country, whether you enter as an expat or you are born here and you are a citizen. We're all here to achieve our goals, and we all have personal goals and the country has goals. And if we can align those two and people can come here and have a good life, then people we will have a constant supply when we need it. And
Yeah,
now we would say that's a great talent management strategy. Then it was, as often in the Emirates, it's a sensible thing to do.
yeah.
So you're right, there were expats coming in, and some had our approach as Westerners. Many expats came from Africa. The rest, so obviously Lebanon was a major provider of labour, and so on and so forth. So you have a great mix of skills, talents, values, approaches, perspectives, and the award was there to be open to everyone.
And to recognise those. So let's
Mm.
have a look at the book. So it's called Celebrating Women of the Emirates. Wow.
Apologies for the
So,
stickers. That's to remind me. That's
oh, no problem.
to
So,
remind me.
what a difference then. So it spanned over 10 years, you writing this book. And like you said, from the
Mm.
beginning and then 10 years later, the difference in these women, I would imagine, was phenomenal.
It's just, for me, it was sort of, if someone said, oh, well, go and do a PhD in the cultural impacts of X or the business values of the Middle East or the geographical implications. So when you look at trying to put the book into a shelf or on a shelf in a bookstore, you would say, is it cultural? Is it geographical? Is it historical? Is it self-help? And I think
Because
it's
it's
an
a unique
amalgam.
category, isn't it? It is a
Yeah,
unique
yeah, it's
category,
a little
genre.
section. um, and I do. So it's amazing. So there's one lady who I think of so fondly, Nazak, and she married an Emirati. She's Kuwaiti, and she spoke English with a Lancashire accent. That was really fascinating to me. And she told me the story that her father had the concession. So that's the car concession. For those of folks listening who may remember, called British Leyland.
Yeah.
And British Leyland were a great competitor here to Ford. And their plant was in Lancashire. And there were very few cars in the Emirates, and certainly in the 70s it was camels and horses. And in the 80s, a few more, because people either didn't need to drive or they sailed. Everything was in sort of 10 minutes location, nothing else. And
Not
people
long
were
ago, was
Bedouin.
it really? It's not
No,
that long ago,
no. I
the
mean, it was
70s.
British.
Think
It
about
was
it.
British rule in the Trucial States, and then we signed it over. So they're in their sort of 44th year. So at that time, then she came over with her father as a little girl, and she was encouraged to see business. And Nazak became head of the roads in Dubai. So she's an engineer, she's a construction engineer, and she has thousands of people working to her. And so she looks after projects throughout the world. She has Swiss engineers, French architects, designers. So she herself manages, and much of that management is through cameras and technology to see how projects are doing. So that could be
Wow,
from a water plant to a road construction. So fantastic.
I
And then
believe
we
it.
have
Yeah.
Salma, who runs a very famous port called Jabal Ali, which anyone who moves products from A to B, moves them, say, from the west coast of the States over to the Middle East, and they're likely to find themselves in Jabal Ali. And
Wow.
she controls all of that empire, if you like, and will. She's very pragmatic. She's both modest and creative. Again, another winner of the Emirates Women's Award.
So did you spend quite some time with these ladies then to get kind of, their background and what their ambitions were and how their upbringing was? Because is it true that females have to get permission from their fathers, their guardians, in able to work?
I think if you go to the letter of the law, it probably hasn't changed and would say you do. I think much like I think myself, I wouldn't if I wanted to do something and my parents had said absolutely not, then I would have pulled back from that. So there's a lot of influencing and lobbying and persuading, which, if you're 14 and 15 and you're at high school, maybe it's no different from any family. So you would never bring your family, shame on your family, and you would never want to do that. But I think with the right level, and parents can see this is a good move. I think the what the awards did and was shine a light on the opportunities for women. It was safe for. So sometimes an example of that would be hospitality. So when
Yeah,
you think of the United Arab Emirates, the opportunities for careers in hospitality is huge. But most families do not want their daughters involved in late night working or obviously
no,
working anywhere near, a bar. And that's about Islamic reasons rather than being female. So sometimes many of these reasons are mixed. They're not female, they are more cultural or sometimes religious.
yeah.
And hotels are very sensible. The chains work really hard because they want to engage, particularly Emirati ladies, because that's a huge market for them. For Emirati ladies staying in the hotels, and they do invest a lot in their own sort of self care. They're very good at that if they have the sufficient income.
Do you find that these families then, are these women from wealthy families in particularly that have kind
Good,
of achieved these
yeah.
awards?
Good point. I mean, we had a rigor and we had needed evidence. So we were very aware right from the beginning to be sort of what could be the PR that could hit us positively and negatively about the awards. And we were very clear that the awards were open to anyone as long as they were over 18, as long as they either had a business for 3 years or they were professionals, which meant they were working. And we made sure that that was communicated across the country. So in the country, you have very, very wealthy families and therefore daughters and mothers and granddaughters and so on. And you have very, I don't want to say poor, but less well off
Yeah.
families. And a real indicator of that is water. So one of the things that most children fall foul of in the Emirates is water. They either drown So what's the number one accident? And it's drowning, because either it's in the pool, because
Wow,
traditionally
really?
Emirati girls don't swim, aren't taught to swim because of the modesty. That is changing. Or they don't have any water and they go searching for water.
And then they
And in
probably
some
still drown with
parts
it.
of the country, there's no street lights. So there's really only two very, very wealthy parts of a seven emirate country. So if you're looking from overseas and you think I'm going to fly to Dubai or Abu Dhabi for a holiday or Ras Al Khaimah, then it's a very different. Don't take one. It's like saying I've only taken one photograph on my trip and that's the whole trip. It's a diverse, culturally alive, fascinating country that is has international cities as well as local villages. And you have
Wow.
Bedouins. And even now, if you go along the coast, you're not more than 40 minutes from the desert, wherever you are,
Wow.
the true
So,
desert.
Judith,
So,
we're just going to go to a commercial break, and this is fascinating, and we'll carry on in a few seconds.
see you soon.
If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Have you ever felt that your voice goes unheard? And you think that you can make a difference if only someone would listen. It's time for women in business to have a place to step into your power, a platform to embrace your hopes, dreams, and your visions, a voice to heal and restore. Your voice can make a difference. We have a platform you deserve to share your story and let your voice be heard. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself the chance to be heard and shine bright. Contact New Dawn Media by texting CAFE to 55312. That's CAFE to 55312. Or call us at 866-224-5422. Your voice can make a difference.
So, welcome back to Authors and More, where I'm joined by Judith Barton. So, Judith, you co-wrote this book with Maggie Clifton, your colleague, didn't you? So, how did that come about, the both of you working together?
Well, we've worked together for quite a long time, and we're very different. So she likes to pin down all of the detail, and she was certainly what I would call a key reviewer of the assessment criteria. And I was chief assessor, and I asked Maggie to act as sort of almost an appeals process to say in our thinking, because we assessed all of the applications with a panel, and they were Emirati ladies or ladies within the Emirates to come onto the panel. Oh, it became a rolling program. It became past winners. So she sort of always almost was keeper of the rules. So I thought it was appropriate to keep the rules in the book. And she really created some challenge about, so why is this interesting? What's going to make a difference here? What was it that Nasdaq really, really did? And she came with me on many of the interviews, and was really sort of the anchor in many ways in that rigorous conversation that we were so proud of.
Yeah. And what sort of things would you be looking for? What sort of criteria in particular from these women, that would achieve these awards? Because obviously, it was fair. You've got people from
Yeah.
lesser wealthy backgrounds, and you've got the wealthy background. But what would really stand out for these ladies, that in particular you've written about in your book?
Well, there were five criteria under each, and the first one we started with sort of achievement really, and that was goal achievement. So what had you done for the business that you were in, and that could be a hospital, or it could be a clothing line. What was it? How is it set up? Because one of the challenges for the wealthy ladies, and sometimes you had to make sure that you were being equitable to them as well as to the less wealthy ladies, setting up a clothing line. Is this something that, family money had bought in and they branded it, or had they done it from
Or
scratch?
they've done it
So,
themselves? Yeah.
yeah. So what was it? And what was the history? And if they needed 3 years accounts that were audited or verified, And that in the beginning was very tough because audited accounts in the way that we know it didn't exist. Because there's no taxation system then, and there was no VAT. VAT there is now, and there is therefore a taxation system. So all of those typical intelligence and yes, this is good, weren't in existence. So that was one criteria. What did you do? The next one was social. So what are you doing for your community? It was a community environmental piece. What were you doing? And that brought about some real challenges, because for someone that supports the faith, the Islamic faith, to talk about what you've done socially and for the community is not considered appropriate.
No, it's frowned upon, yeah.
And they would pay zakat, which obviously happens during Ramadan, a percentage of their salary. So they were often keen to talk about the environmental footprint. And given this was 2004 and 5, they were way above and beyond many in Western and certainly European countries, and their footprint was there. And they also went on to talk about their aspirations, so what was coming up and how were they developing for that. And one of the criteria was innovation. So what have you done differently? And for some that was much easier. So we had one winner who was very keen on, they were actually leading testing, blood testing for athletics, and wanted to establish themselves.
Drug testing.
Drug testing, yes.
Yeah.
And they were very much and that's a interesting cultural point, because they were very nervous about calling it drug testing. But I understand they are front and centre for the World Cup in Qatar 2022.
Yes, yeah, wow.
So
hopefully that will go ahead.
Hopefully that will go ahead, and we were involved in sort of the moment it was announced, so it was quite interesting to see and all of that. So there were, and there was, so what did you plan and what have you achieved? What's your ongoing development as an individual to deliver this plan? What's your innovation that you were after, and where are you going? Who supports you in all of this? So who was your mentor, your guide, your role model? And that culturally brings a lot of spiritual conversations in there. And what's your community impact in all of this, or your social impact? So, and it was a written piece, and people could write this in obviously Arabic or English.
And what would they get? What would the award entail? Would they get like a starter figure, or?
Yes, they received everyone who entered, if they wish, would be mentored by myself. So they would have their one-to-one feedback and they would be mentored. They received their plaque, their recognition, their formal recognition from a very glamorous evening dinner that was hosted, and the patron Sheikh Ahmed. And then we would have, yes, his name. So that was a very important plaque, and the symbol was a butterfly. So I was awarded sort of beautiful butterflies, and sometimes they were brass, sometimes they were crystal. And the ladies, initially, there were different types of gifts. Sometimes it wasn't monetary. Sometimes it was a watch. Sometimes the first year it was a lovely diamond, which sounds very, very glamorous from where we sit. We're used to a certificate, that was very, very nice. Yeah, put it on the wall. And one lady who came from a less well-off family immediately said, "I'm going to sell my gift and pay for a master's degree."
Well, do you know, that was my next question. I was going to say, the people in the poorer families, for better a word, would they have to sell a watch or something like that, maybe to look after their families, but they were going to use that to do a degree, which is brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. And that there was no sort of, that was almost a sort of an extra sort of spirit and an energy that people saw through that, and they could do as they wished. They were the other point about the awards, no one knew until the night.
Oh, if they won an award or not. It wasn't like you're given a list and it would travel around.
That was a complete change. that was a complete change, because culturally, if they had known who was in ranking the top 8 and we're going to pick 4 of you, the rest wouldn't come to the event. So we wanted to keep it, and it was all done in code. And my job was to make sure that that happened, the governance of the awards, and obviously to take the less positive feedback when, you know, the favourite maybe didn't win and things like that.
Yeah.
So
So how has feedback been? How has the response been, you know, in the UAE in, you know, in regards to your book? Is it something they're quite happy about that you wrote it?
They were initially they were fascinated by the choice of participants, because we were very careful. We wanted to show the diversity both of location within the country, the diversity between Emiratis and expats, the diversity of success, if you like, what success could be. We didn't want it to be one, because we knew that young girls were reading this, because lots of the girls' schools had copies, and we wanted them to be motivated. So if they only ever saw someone having a clothes shop, we wanted to see water engineers, construction engineers, pilots. We had the most senior ranking military person, a female major who flew fighter jets.
Wow.
You know, we wanted to see that. And she came in a full, you know, flight suit, and someone greeted her and said, "Oh, welcome, sir," because she couldn't tell the gender. "Welcome, sir." And I loved it, because she took her helmet off, and this sort of, you know, cascade of gorgeous hair came down, and we all, you know, I smiled because I knew exactly who it was. We wanted young people to see
that. So would you would the Emirati women be allowed to fly commercial jets? Now, passenger jets?
Yes.
They're allowed to do that?
Yes, they are. Emirates and Etihad have a specific program now. And I think when I last checked, I think Etihad were actively seeking over 20. I think they'd nearly either hit the 20 target or more captains and first officers, female captains that are Emirati.
I was just thinking back to the hospitality that you were talking about earlier, and how the families wouldn't like it was their kind of culture not to be out in the evening, kind of thing. How would they get around that? I mean, I know they're on a plane as such, but it's still that weird hours.
And particularly as they're flying long haul. I think because of that sort of professional, and they were in charge. They weren't sort of serving. There was a different perspective, and the amount of technical. Now it may be that there's comfort in that you've got a female captain and first officer flying together.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Oh, it's so fascinating. I can't believe you put all this into a book, Judith. So just hold the book up for us one more time. So it's called Celebrating Women in Emirates.
Orange reminder stickers.
Where can we buy the book from? Anyone that's interested or fascinated by this topic, where can they get the book from?
They can get that by emailing info@britishschoolofcoaching.com. And so it used to be an open sale, and then we had to go for a reprint. So that's the best route to get a copy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you all the best with the book and the British School of Coaching, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you, Karen, and you. Take care.
Thank you. So that was Judith Barton from British School of Coaching with her fabulous book, Celebrating Women of the Emirates. A great topic. It really is interesting to find out all about these Emirati women. So thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week, where we have Emma Guy on the show. Have a great week. Be inspired. Get motivated. Creative. And believe that you can achieve whatever your goals may be. Join me, Karen Kelly, each Tuesday for Authors and More, with amazing guests sharing their journey to help get you where you need to be.